So again, you know, as the Epstein files were coming out, as they were about to reveal Donald Trump, and then of course the ICC about to convict King Bibi. Now you might think that King Bibi is the worst guy there is. There's one that's worse than him. This Bennett guy that would succeed King Bibi if King Bibi was brought before court. Because he's talking about going to war with Turkey. And he's also talking about, well, if you don't support Israel, well, we'll create a 9/11, or a 9/11 attack will happen. A 9/11 style attack. So, you know, hey, things are going to continue to get more chaotic as they are engineering another fake virus. You know, make sure this is recording. Shalom, first and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash, double honors, the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teaching this truth with sincerity, and shout out to the Akims out there in the four corners of the earth proclaim this truth. Brak of the Yahweh, Brak of the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash, Brak of Tum.
Governments around the world are spreading the hantavirus.
Yep, they
so
sure
it
are.
can spread globally before they have a lockdown. They're going to lock the world down again, this time ahead of nuclear Armageddon. That's what's coming. Hantavirus, global lockdown, nuclear war. It's coming. And it's too late to do anything about it.
And it won't be the last pandemic. The next one could be far more severe. I mean, this one, it killed millions. It was awful.
Hey, we've been telling you for a long time.
You know, actually, President Trump's leadership was factoring getting that out quickly. And so when I spoke to him, I said, okay, here's some other medical innovations, including a thing called an HIV cure that could be accelerated. So, you know, we should be more prepared both for a pandemic. I'd say that's still number one. You know, you can worry about nuclear war, you can worry about AI. There's plenty to worry about.
What's up, everybody? We got breaking news. The hantavirus that is in the news cycle is the new mind control campaign, and it is all fake. It is all a lie. There is no actual hantavirus that is going to resemble a so-called pandemic. There are no pandemics. They're all fake. They're all nonsense. And it's because they've never actually isolated a single virus in the history of the world. I'm coming from a Pfizer whistleblower perspective who worked on the formulations of the COVID-19 from March of 2021 through April of 2022. I am a whistleblower. I have sent whistleblower affidavits. My website is justintegrity.net. And that's because I am here to tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. The agenda behind this next virus is most likely going to be linked to some form of travel restrictions and some form of efforts, and really looking to lock down people again. And they're going to try and spin it so that people buy into their mass surveillance grid agenda, whoever they are. The reality is, there is no virus, my friends. They use cartoons to depict these viruses. They might as well put Santa or the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy putting money under your pillow and call that a virus. Because the reality is, they've never proven this, and now this hantavirus is all over Twitter, it's all over Instagram, it's all over TikTok. The whole thing is fake. It's an entire fraudulent hoax. Wake up. Tell everybody you know that we do not comply. We will not wear masks. We will not take a mask that is somehow being pre-planned by Moderna in 2024. We will not comply as humanity. That is my whistleblower statement. Justin Leslie, signing off. Love you guys.
Shalom. I would like to give all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to all you sincere Akim, Christians right across the four corners of the world. And just another news update through the spirit, the power, and the vibration of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. So concerning current events, here you have it with this new global paranoia by the name of hantavirus. Hantavirus. It is considered as a deadly respiratory disease with a 30% plus fatality rate. And come to think about it, this same website that I'm using right here as a reference, Natural News, actually did an article regarding this so-called deadly virus back in September 2012, where the CDC issued out a warning about an outbreak at the Yosemite National Park and sent out a warning to about 10,000 people that stay in these tent cabins and how they could be at risk contracting this deadly rodent-borne outbreak or virus. And again, this article was published in September 2012. So fast forward to 2026, here we are again concerning this hantavirus outbreak. And from the New York Post, they stated how 23 hantavirus cruise passengers returned home to all corners, including the U.S., and one is already sick. And how about this? Hanta, again, which is spelled H-A-N-T-A, is a Hungarian slang term that means nonsense, lies, bluffy, or telltales. So in regard to one of the opening videos that Pfizer whistleblower stated of how this whole hantavirus outbreak concerning the cruise ship is nothing but nonsense, it's lies. However, it's being propagated by mainstream media to be tied into travel restrictions, more forced jabs, and also a mass surveillance grid agenda. Because this new global scare can definitely financially impact the cruise ship industry, which is what linked to traveling. And according to the United Nations Agenda 2030, one of their main guidelines or restrictions are travel restrictions when they implement this left-handed NWO. So linking all of this up through the spirit of this whistleblower definitely fulfills end-time biblical prophecies. Let's get right quick to the book of Psalm, the 64th chapter and the 8th verse. So they, referring to these whistleblowers who were once insiders that was associated with these dark secret councils and promoting future sinister agendas for humanity. But now the Spirit is upon them to fulfill end-time biblical prophecies to spill the beans, to the point where they're disclosing everything to the masses, bringing everything out to the forefront. So they should make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them should flee away. So let's get right quick from naturalnews.com, and the title says, Cruise ship with hantavirus outbreak allowed to dock in Spain's Canary Islands. This article was published on May the 7th, 2026. And it says, the Spanish government has granted permission for a cruise ship hit by a suspected hantavirus outbreak to dock in the Canary Islands, following a request from the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, according to a statement from Madrid on Tuesday. The MV Pedos, a Dutch flag vessel operated by Oceanwide Expeditions, is currently anchored off Cape Verde with 147 passengers and crew from 23 countries on board. 3 people have died, 1 is critically ill, and 3 others are reporting mild symptoms, the WHO said in a statement cited by the Associated Press. The Spanish government said the move was made on humanitarian grounds as Cape Verde lacks the capacity to handle the operation, and the Canary Islands is the nearest location with the required facilities. Evacuation and medical response. 2 crew members, a British national and a Dutch national, are being prepared for urgent medical evacuation via Cape Verde to the Netherlands. Oceanwide Expeditions said on Tuesday a 3rd person linked to a passenger who died on May the 2nd is also expected to be evacuated, the company stated. Cape Verde's health ministry said medical teams have boarded the ship and that patients will be airlifted by air ambulance before the vessel resumes its journey. A British passenger who was evacuated earlier remains in intensive care in Johannesburg, South Africa, according to the WHO. Outbreak details and risk assessment. The WHO said the outbreak poses a low risk to the global population based on current understanding of the hantavirus transmission. However, the agency noted that rare human-to-human transmission may have occurred among close contacts aboard the ship, and testing continues to identify the strain involved. Hantavirus is typically spread through contact with the urine, feces, or saliva of infected rodents. A July study published in Pathogens, funded by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, described experiments in which scientists aerosolized sin nombre virus, a hantavirus with an estimated 30% fatality rate, to test its airborne stability. The book on pandemics by David Waltner notes that controlling disease spread often requires culturally sensitive engagement with local populations, particularly when quarantine measures disrupt social bonds. Meanwhile, a major FDA recall in January 2026 highlighted contamination risks from rodent droppings in food and drug facilities. And jump down. Quarantine and port instructions. Passengers have been ordered to remain in their cabins while disinfection and other public health measures are carried out. The Spanish government said the port of arrival in the Canary Islands has not yet been determined, but the ship is expected to arrive in 3 to 4 days. The Canary Islands president publicly opposed the docking, but the Spanish government overruled the objection, citing humanitarian obligations under international law. The WHO report noted that initial public health messaging, such as the captain's early denial of infectious risk, may have delayed appropriate responses. The book, Who Logs China's Efforts in Combating CV, highlights the importance of transparent public communication during outbreaks, a point often emphasized by pandemic experts. So yeah, that's about it with that. And if you are measuring the times diligently within itself, then you can see very clearly that we are definitely within a spiritual warfare. And our main biblical arch enemy, beginning with the tabernacle of Esau Edom, are very stern about causing all. And this sinister agenda is a part of him to come down with great wrath because he knows that he has for a short time. So again, this is a spiritual warfare. And a major part of warfare is to know your enemy. And within a volume of the book, hence the Holy Bible, we always reference Esau Edom as the serpent. Hence Genesis, the 3rd chapter, how that serpent was more subtle than any creature within the field, which goes into how crafty, devious, and how very artful he is with his deceptions. And that's because the same hantavirus was mentioned within the show called X-Files on season 7, episode 12. And the guy declared it as a solid weapon for a quiet war. And then out the volume of the book warned us about the characteristics of this serpent, pursuant to Psalm 55 and 21, how the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. That's associated with that same horse that was read when you read Revelation, the 6th chapter, the 4th verse. And when that power was given to him, and what was also given to him? A great sword, which is Esau's blessing on the left-hand side. And that sword can come into many fashions and forms. Hence pestilences, which is an infectious or contagious disease, plague, epidemic, or pandemic. So therefore, by knowing Esau's nature, again, by the volume of the book, where it's also stated to never trust your enemy, we're supposed to be the children of light. Because even within the world, a lot of people are already making videos online counteracting this false narrative concerning this hantavirus outbreak, dealing with the cruise ship. And bringing out how Esau is prophesying on the left-hand side hits that revelation of the method of him bringing up this hantavirus ordeal within his show, the X-Files, and how people going into that word hanta, again, which is a Hungarian slang term that means nonsense or lies. And that takes me to 2 Corinthians, the 2nd chapter, and 11th verse within the NLT, the New Living Translation, so that Satan will not outsmart us, but we are familiar with his evil schemes. And Bill Gates blatantly came out years ago and properly boasted how the C-19 was not the last pandemic. With that being said, that will still go over people's heads. So again, it's definitely not a time for him to be vulnerable within these dreadful apocalyptic times. But Esau Edom is bringing forth these catastrophic events because he knows that he has for a short time. So again, so that Satan will not outsmart us, for we are familiar with his evil schemes. And by being familiar, that means that we have the gift of the Holy Spirit and to really see Esau's true nature according to the volume of the book. And that's how you know the wicked is being revealed more and more within these end times. And what's the scheme? It's a devious, systematic plan of action. And what's coming up this summer? The World Cup. And that's going to take place from June 11th to July the 19th. And it's going to be hosted by 3 countries: Canada, Mexico, and of course, the US. And that's going to amass a lot of people, especially worldwide, and congregating together within one city, which can be another angle that this servant can use for his sinister agenda regarding this deadly plague. So hopping back on that whistleblower statement that he made at the beginning of this video, he was going into how there is no actual hunted virus that's going to resemble a so-called pandemic, and how they have never isolated a single virus within the history of the world. And he was going into how there's no pandemic, it's all nonsense and lies. However, Yahweh Bahashim Al-Shah has to do something to fulfill his words and to put within Esau's spirit to unleash a deadly global plague. Because the words of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah are faithful and true. So therefore it has to come into fruition. Like the narrative of this hantavirus outbreak that's on a cruise ship might be false, but some type of deadly plague or plagues has to come into fruition. Because it fulfills the words of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah. And that takes me to Matthew 24 verse 7. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, which goes into an extreme scarcity of food and water, and pestilences. Again, an infectious or contagious disease, plague, epidemic, or pandemic, and earthquakes in diverse places, which means that it's going to be scattered round and about. And
This can happen if you're eating,
referring to America, or Babylon the Great, will definitely receive all of these plagues, which goes into
fake
widespread
foods. Think about it.
Troubles, and great sufferings. So that pretty much concludes the lesson for the spirit. Cruise ship with hantavirus outbreak allowed to dock in Spain's Canary Islands. It comes to mention Gene Hackman, which was an actor, his wife at the time frame supposedly died of what? Hantavirus. And this was back in February 2025. So here we are again with this hantavirus outbreak being propagated within mainstream media. So therefore, with that being said, it's important for us to stand upon our watch and continue to measure the times. So with that, hopefully you all stay edified, you all stay strong, keep pushing forward. Shalom.
And it leads me to this, though, that also the food is fake. A lot of people are buying those impossible foods, you know. And what do you think is going to happen with lab grown? They can put any infectious diseases in there. So yeah, I believe that's going to be spread worldwide. And you don't know what they're putting in the food, okay? They've been putting rodent and all kinds of shit in there for a long time, GMOs, etc. You know, poisons. We're being poisoned on every level. So, like everything else, so, you know, getting into this. Well, I always knew that the official story never made any sense. You know, that supposedly, you know, he was hooked up to an IV. You know, they said all kinds of shit, that he likes to live inside a vortex or some shit like that, or inside a bulb. And his funeral was really weird too. Remember, they put him in like a capsule and stuff? Yeah, they wanted to weird you out so that if he ever came out with anything against him, nobody would believe him because, oh, that Michael Jackson, he's just too weird. But, you know, now it's, you know, with what we now see with Trump trying to hide everything and them trying to hide themselves. Well, Michael Jackson was going to reveal it years ago, because look at what they did, though. You know, he was about to reveal all these pedophiles that, you know, obviously did things to him when he was younger, too. He was about to reveal all that, but before he could ever reveal, well, they continued to assassinate his character. Anyhow, you know, that's what it was all about. So they had to, because Esau being exposed day in and day out, you know, as a pedophile, as a child molester, you know, well, they had to come up with this war, because he's done. He's done. Everybody's blowing the whistle on him. And this guy here has been revealing a lot of the stuff that goes on in Pedowood. I mean, he exclusively makes videos based upon that.
Buried deep in the declassified Epstein files from the DOJ vaults, evidence that Israel masterminded Michael Jackson's 2009 assassination to protect the elite blackmail web. Michael wasn't just a threat, he was a ticking bomb. He was in the process of going public, opposing Israel's crimes against humanity. The exact same move that cost Charlie Kirk his life almost 2 decades later. But Michael dug deeper. Declassified documents confirm he amassed proof of global elite child exploitation rings, with smoking gun intel on the role played by record industry executives. Michael had the dirt on their horrors. Predators, shielded by Platinum Records, royalties and Mossad ops. So, they erased him. A staged lethal dose of propofol administered by Dr. Conrad Murray. Now the files reveal this was no tragic mishap. Michael was hot on their trail. He was warning children to stay away from Epstein. And we have the receipts. His death was a cold-blooded ritual execution carried out by Israel, staged in that cult hospital to send a message to anybody who dared threaten the bloodline empire. Before we dive in, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and join the People's Voice to see all the photos from the Epstein files and jump to one obvious conclusion. But what they fail to understand is that Michael was never on Epstein's side. He was protecting children from Epstein and the cabal of child predators. And we have the receipts to prove it. The photo of Jackson with Epstein was from 2003. The very same year, the Scary Movie franchise inserted a bizarre scene mocking Michael. This wasn't comedy. This was a warning. Comply, or the entertainment industry machine will be weaponized to destroy you. Enter the prince of 90s child stardom himself, Macaulay Culkin.
A lovely cheese pizza just for me.
Yeah, and you know what Pizzagate
Here's where it
is.
gets really twisted and deeply tragic. As a young boy, Macaulay Culkin appeared in Michael Jackson's iconic music video for Black or White.
You are wasting your time with this garbage. Now go to bed!
Okay.
Culkin and Michael Jackson became close friends. Jackson gave him advice about surviving life as a child star, and Culkin spent a lot of time with the King of Pop at his Neverland Ranch. Culkin says that Michael was actively protecting Hollywood's children from the satanic pedophile cult. That's exactly why they came for him. They framed Michael with the very crimes they themselves were committing against children.
Was somebody saying that he was trying to protect the kids?
Somebody. Yeah, Macaulay Culkin.
Oh, all right. So a name.
He gave an interview stating that Michael Jackson once intervened, discouraging him from boarding a flight to an island later associated with Jeffrey Epstein. It doesn't say it's Little St. James Island, but it's an island later associated with Epstein. And they presumed that Michael Jackson may have stepped in to help other kids not go to that island. But it was that one statement from Macaulay Culkin. That's pretty much it.
Right. So again, I knew it was from somewhat casual, but I mean,
so was Michael Jackson helping the kids? Was Michael Jackson trying to prevent Epstein from doing what he was doing?
I'll never forget that. Michael Jackson saved me from getting on a plane to that tiny island.
There it is.
When Michael finally grasped the true depths of the evil he was dealing with, after spending time around the likes of Rabbi Shmuley and Jeffrey Epstein, he was a broken man. He could barely find the strength to keep living. And just like Charlie Kirk, Michael knew when they were coming for him. His final phone call, the night before he died, has been suppressed for years. Listen closely. you'll understand why they're desperate to keep it under wraps.
I don't know if I should tell you this, but I don't know who may be listening. There may be a group of people that want to degrade me. They don't want me hearing more.
I don't understand it. What do you mean? Talk to me.
Talk about it over the phone. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just feel in my soul, all God knows, they could keep me. They could sell me. They could bring me and say I will be dosing with drugs. They could do a lot of things.
They could really...
Many people say the killing of Charlie Kirk was the most shocking political assassination of our time. But history is littered with other deaths that were never supposed to be recognized for what they really were. Not accidents, not overdoses, not bad luck. Assassinations. And always for the same reason Charlie was silenced. A voice that grew too loud, that asked the wrong questions, and woke too many people up. When somebody starts pulling back the curtain on who's really controlling the puppet strings, these people don't argue with them, they don't debate them, they smear them, they silence them. Finally, they erase them. After the break, a devastating confession by a CIA agent, revealing a covert alliance between Mossad and CIA Black Ops didn't just influence the music industry, it purged it. Prince, whacked. Michael Jackson, silenced. And the list continues to grow. Back in a moment. Think the healthiest surgeon who's done with the system? It's the truth they spoons. This isn't hype. It's the truth they don't want you to know about. Visit getolive1.com/GBV. The link will be now. You won't regret it. Michael Jackson enraged the slave owners at Sony when he wrote a song called Don't Cry Palestine. The Zionist mafia in control of the music industry marked him for destruction when he began calling them out in public, exposing their crimes. He knew exactly who was destroying his career, his reputation, and who was coming for his life.
Michael Jackson arrived at the location of his music video under an umbrella to protect him from the sun and with 2 children by his side. He was in Brazil to shoot the music video for his song, They Don't Care About Us. Last year he angered Jewish groups when he sang these words. Michael then gave in to pressure and changed the song, but in Brazil the controversial lyrics were back and he sang it this way. We showed footage of the video shoot to Rabbi Marvin Heyer, an activist for Jewish causes, who was outraged because last June Jackson sent him a letter of apology for singing those lyrics.
I'm shocked. Jew me, sue me, kick me, kite me. Those are the words that he told us that he would never use again.
John Holmstrom, a retired CIA agent, dropped a bombshell on NTV, the national Russian television channel. He revealed that in the 1980s the music industry was a psyop run by the CIA and Mossad, designed to brainwash the youth and control the younger generations. He says Michael Jackson was not a pedophile. He says anybody can look at Michael's FBI files and see the truth. They investigated him for years and concluded he was a saint. It was the CIA and Mossad who dragged his name through the mud because he refused to fall in line.
We knew this music had the power to shape young minds. Our mission was to channel teenage angst, turning Generation X into a culture that was all about decadence, drug use, and anti-establishment rebellion, sparking riots and more division within society. We even infiltrated mainstream radio to blast their tracks and reach millions every day.
According to Holmstrom, the agency in connection with Mossad killed MJ, Prince and Tom Petty as part of their psyop to gatekeep the culture and prevent the American youth from turning against Israel.
If you want to know the truth about Michael Jackson, look in the FBI files. The man was a modern-day saint. The Bureau investigated him for years. They found nothing. But the CIA, we don't investigate. We instigate. We create.
And saint means Israelite, by the way.
We assassinate. They feared his reach, not just his fame, his influence. Millions adored him across every border, every language, every continent. A man like that could shift an entire generation overnight.
Assassinating beloved artists, promoting antisocial culture, flooding the streets with hard drugs. Is there anything the CIA and Mossad hasn't done to destroy America from within?
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
2026, nothing has changed. The Zionists still pull the strings behind the intelligence agencies. The faces shift, the substances change, but the result is always the same. Streets flooded with drugs, designed to keep people numb, confused, and easy to manage.
And that's why they're not rebelling against them like they should.
And heroes assassinated for the crime of standing up to Israel. Back then, voices like Michael Jackson and Prince were silenced for stepping out of line, for reaching too many people with ideas that couldn't be controlled. And now a new generation of truth tellers is in their crosshairs. People who challenge the narrative. People who wake their audiences up. People like Charlie Kirk. Speak too loudly, and the system speaks back. It's time to dismantle a 9,000-year-old satanic pedophile ring. a cabal that slithered through history, hiding in plain sight and mocking their victims for centuries. And now Hollywood and the media are their weapons. Films, shows and news, laced with symbolism that degrades survivors, normalizes the horror, and gaslights the world into disbelief. It's all part of the ritual, exposing the horror while daring us to believe it. Let's put this into perspective. Jeffrey Epstein's youngest victim still had his umbilical cord attached. Regardless of your political opinions, we now have enough evidence to prove without doubt that the left and right are ruled by the same psychopathic predators. They feed on fetuses, steal babies, deceive children, and legally kidnap orphans, exploiting them all to their disgusting liking. We're definitely not angry enough. Everything we're dropping here is the kind of material that gets hard drives wiped, servers torched, and people suicided before breakfast. If you're doing your own research and digging into dangerous topics online, you need to be protected. Legacy VPNs?
Yep. So keep a VPN, because eventually, they're going to take this word off, right? And that's why I'm saying that eventually, already what they did to YouTube before, just for certain buzzwords, right? That V word you couldn't say anymore. Well, now with another fake pandemic out there, my videos may not be on there much longer, to be honest, and as a lot of other brothers' videos may not be on there much longer, because, how dare you say that hantavirus is a hoax? How dare you say that COVID was a hoax? Even though most people know it was a hoax. And we were saying it, I remember before it even went mainstream in May, coincidentally, between April and May of 2020. Man, Elder Brother Malcolm, Apostle Gabar, and others, even Apostle Ramlab, Apostle Tahar, we all were saying it, that they're going to go full throttle with this and, give Esau an inch, he'll take a mile. And that pretty much the whole thing was a hoax. We called it out even before the full-blown lockdown, which just so happened to be the pedophile in power now, Donald Trump. So, yeah, they got to come up with something, because, everybody keeps on saying, what about the Epstein files? What about Epstein? And Trump can't stand it because he's being exposed on a daily basis. So, a war. Why not take everybody to war? Or come up with another fake pandemic? World Bank warns oil demand destruction spreading. Largest energy supply shock on record. The World Bank warned that disruption to the global flow of oil as a result of the Iran war is now spreading and triggering a supply shock. Well, in the previous video, California is no longer going to get any. World Bank warned that disruption to the global flow of oil as a result of the Iran war is now spreading, triggering a supply shock that is reducing global demand. So, like everything else, though, they are looking to get rid of it, right? And they want to limit how much you travel. They've been pushing for electric cars for so long. Well, if you're completely out of oil and you can't get gas anymore, which they show you that in a lot of movies, that gas ran out. Well, that's all part of it. But then, you got a quarantine, you got all these other things in place. Yeah, they're really going, they may just go through with it, Doesn't look good. Explosion rocks major New Orleans area refinery as fuel markets tighten. Oh no, another fucking refinery on fire. Oh man, especially with the Iran war. Look at all this shit, right? You believe this is an accident? Fire broke out on Friday afternoon at PBF's Energy Chamate refinery outside New Orleans, according to the facility. Reuters cited people familiar with the incident said the 190,000 barrel per day Chamate refinery suffered an explosion on Friday afternoon. The explosion can be traced to a reformer heater used to convert. They deliberately are doing it. They're destroying the fuel. So here's a little bit of what that looks like. Yep, they're setting it on fire. It's on fire. So, and don't forget, Trump is also using ISIS, to target people he doesn't like, which are the Israelites. So he sends ISIS after them. Man, we are in Jacob's trouble. You can pretend to be oblivious, but it's slapping you in the face, man. U.S. could drill for oil under military bases. Here we go. Administration of U.S. President Trump considering extracting oil from beneath military bases to refill the depleted Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Created in the mid-1970s, the SPR is an energy stockpile meant to alleviate oil price spikes in times of supply disruption. So he's going to claim to open up refineries. Yeah, he can pretend all he wants to. The shortages are still going to be there, and they're looking to get rid of it, but he's going to make it look like he's trying to play the hero of the day. So, even more about who controls Congress, etc., right? Because these, least the flock, these Amalekites run everything. These fake Jews. Because they're not really Jews at all. So, crisis that they can control. The global energy, right? You know, global oil, etc.
I'd like to welcome from London Dr. Marcos Papadopoulos, expert on international relations and specialized in Middle East affairs. Hello, sir, Dr. Marcos. Dr. Marcos, right now, everyone is interested to secure a deal regarding the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, speaking about the necessity of having international guarantees. Everyone is looking for that. Do you think we are too far from securing a deal that could solve the issue of the Strait of Hormuz?
You know, no deal will be made.
Yes, I agree with your analysis. This is a very precarious truce, and it could therefore collapse at any moment in time. Iran and the Iranian people will not tolerate a gun being put to their head. The Americans and the Israelis tried that when they savagely, barbarically bombed Iran. And how did Iran and the Iranian people respond? They responded in a most ferocious way, which devastated American military bases in the region and devastated large parts of Israel. Now, Trump is saying that the illegal naval blockade on the Strait of Hormuz will remain in force until there is a permanent solution, a permanent agreement between Washington and Tehran. Well, again, the Iranian people will not tolerate a gun being put to their head. So it is in everyone's interests, in particular, the people of the region, for there to be a permanent ceasefire. But in all of this, we must not forget one major cardinal factor, the Israeli factor. Israel does not want there to be a permanent ceasefire. Israel does not want there to be an agreement between Washington and Tehran. Other countries in the world are seeking a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, and a solution, but not Israel. And why is that so important? Because Trump and much of the Trump administration are controlled by the Israelis. Indeed, the American political commentator Tucker Carlson recently said that. Tucker Carlson said clearly that Trump is controlled, not simply by Netanyahu, but by the Israeli state as a whole.
Yes, sir. Even this it was not the main point which we want to discuss, but according to your analysis, how Trump can best as the commander or the president for the most important country, when we see these statement comments that Israel is a decision maker and Israel controls the decision of U.S.?
Well, first of all, we need to understand the actual structure of power in America. The president is not in control, or at the very least, is not fully in control. The American deep state, or the American ruling elite, ultimately is in control. And two of the main components of the American ruling elite is the military-industrial complex and Zionists. This doesn't just apply to Trump, it applies to all of his predecessors, Biden, Obama, Bush, Clinton, and so on and so on. That is the reality of the structure of power in America. But it is true to say that Trump is particularly controlled by the Israelis for a number of reasons, one of them being his business dealings with the Israelis. So, for example, Sheldon Adelson, or the late Sheldon Adelson. It was Mr. Adelson who introduced Netanyahu and Trump to each other. So that is why countries such as China and Pakistan can attempt to find a peaceful solution to the situation between America and Iran. And I wish them well. Of course I wish them well. But in all of this, we cannot ignore the reality that Trump is beholden to Israel, that Israel, because of its influence in America through Zionism in particular, wields massive power in America. Virtually every member of Congress is bought and paid for by the Israelis, bought and paid for by Zionists. So we can talk about international efforts to find a permanent ceasefire, but those efforts will be in vain because of the Israeli factor.
So, Dr. Mercados, what are the chances of securing a deal between Iran and the U.S.? Both sides want to secure a deal. There are initiatives that are offered, and even after the issue of the Strait of Hormuz rising, and speaking about American steps after international pressure, the U.S. has retreated a little bit in order to secure a deal. So do you think we are facing a very, very difficult ashes as everything which is on the table is not suitable with the Israeli perspective?
Of course, nothing is impossible, but I myself am not optimistic. Why? Because it all revolves around Trump and other senior members of his administration.
Oh, these pedophiles.
If, for example, Trump was to resign today, then it's possible, just possible, that his successor would not be as controlled by the Israelis as Trump is. And in those circumstances,
because Trump is Israeli,
a ceasefire could be achieved. Or, if this situation lasts until this November, when there are the midterm elections in America, and the Republican Party is expected to lose control of the Senate and the House of Representatives, then, in those circumstances, Trump's wings would be clipped, so to speak, and that would bring about an end to the war. Not that the Democrats are friends to the Arab people, not that they're friends to Iran, not that they're not controlled by the Zionists, but the Democrats are doing everything they can to bring Trump down. But again, the Democrats are as dangerous to world peace as are the Republicans. So in those two circumstances, which I've just outlined, therein could be a possibility for a permanent ceasefire.
But there won't be, see? Here's the thing, though, is that Esau has a destination, and his final destination has already been determined. The scriptures tell you that. But, you know, they would love to see Trump and peace are thrown out, but we believe he's where he needs to be now. King Bibi may actually be out, and you got to watch for that Bennett guy, as I said before. Because he's even more dangerous than King Bibi. Yeah, there's somebody more dangerous than King Bibi. And we already know how bad King Bibi is, but this fucking Bennett guy is even worse. Ideology, family, and history. The United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia feud explained. See, because that's what's really going on, and that's why they put a halt to Donald Trump using their air bases. Saudi Arabia sees itself as the leader in the Arab and Muslim world, and the United Arab Emirates sees itself as a global power constrained by old Gulf links. So, right now, to punish Saudi Arabia, Trump made a deal with the United Arab Emirates. And that really pissed off Saudi Arabia. So that's what this is really about. And United Arab Emirates was actually attacked in retaliation for leaving OPEC. Went into this before. Saudi Arabia tried to bribe the Prince of United Arab Emirates Al Nahyan family to cede control of a desert oasis suspected of containing vast quantities of oil. The Sheikh rejected the offer to betray his family, and Saudi Arabia launched a failed invasion of the territory. So they lost years ago over this. It's always been that way. But now you tie into everything that just recently happened. You know, but let's go into some history there. This is how the late journalist summed up the legendary 1950s Bahraini dispute between the Saudi royal family, Oman, and the Trucial States, which would become the United Arab Emirates in his classic 1966 book. Sheikh, the Saudi Arabians tried to bribe by tailing with Zayed bin al-Nona, known as the Lord of Bahraini, but remembered in history as the founder of the United Arab Emirates. His son, Mohammed bin Zayed, is now locked in his own nasty spat with another Saudi family member, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So this is where you bring everything in, and you got the ties to the U.S. If you put ideology, family, and history together, you can understand the Saudi-United Arab Emirates feud. Patrick Theos, former U.S. diplomat and ambassador who first arrived in the Middle East, aka West Asia, when the Bahraini dispute was still warm to the touch, told Middle East Eye. Right now, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates are at loggerheads in almost every theater imaginable, from the deserts of Libya to global energy markets. So there's where Libya, all of them are mentioned. You see, it does cover Saudi Arabia when you listen to the prophecy of Ezekiel 38. Yeah, there's going to be a war over there, duh. Well, they already took out Libya's leader, Muammar Gaddafi, years ago. But no doubt that it's all about the oil at the end of the day. And who controls the oil? Who holds the cards? Who holds the aces? Trump threatens to resume Project Freedom Plus if Iran deal not sealed. Oh, you got another place to launch the sorties? Well, obviously, he might have made a newer deal. U.S. President Trump warned Friday that D.C. may escalate its military posture in the Strait if a deal with Iran is not finalized, threatening to revive and expand the paused Project Freedom project. We'll go on a different route. Everything doesn't get signed up, buttoned up, Trump told reporters at D.C. He explained that Pakistan, which has mediated talks between D.C. and Tehran, asked the U.S. not to resume the military operation. Yeah. More Trump shit. Israeli state pushing U.S. towards return to Iran war. Destruction of energy infrastructure, because that's exactly what Trump is threatening once again. Israeli officials telling D.C. to target Iran's energy infrastructure and resume military operations against Tehran. The Israeli state has pushed the U.S. to a renewed war. The war never ended. According to the report, Israeli officials believe Iran's energy infrastructure could be destroyed within 24 hours, forcing Tehran into negotiations. So, yeah, let's bomb facilities. Let's threaten them. So here we go. Also, you got a lot of these other countries, don't want to go with the Israeli state. And then Trump is freaking out because he's an Israeli himself. He's an Amalekite. That's why he's the biggest fucking piece of shit that there ever was. He fits all the categories of the king of Babylon. So here we go. Back to the battlefield, right?
Welcome back. Tonight,
War
we're
on.
witnessing something that would have been unthinkable just a few short months ago. The unraveling of American military discipline live, in real time, before the eyes of the entire world. Multiple reports now confirm that senior United States generals, the very commanders entrusted to execute Washington's so-called Project Freedom, are actively refusing, defying, and in some cases, outright sabotaging the illegal orders coming from their commander-in-chief.
Reports suggest that dozens of top generals are defying President Trump's orders, with some being removed or forced out overnight.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has forced out the Army's chief of staff. Four military officials tell NBC News.
Saudi Arabia denied the United States access to its airspace and Prince Sultan Air Base during Trump's newly launched Project Freedom operation in the Strait of Hormuz.
This is not a drill. This is not a minor procedural hiccup. A retired United States Army Lieutenant General, a man who spent 40 years in uniform, went on national television this week and stated publicly that military commanders are now preparing to disobey Donald Trump's direct orders. The reason? Those orders, demanding the deliberate destruction of civilian infrastructure, power plants, and bridges inside Iran, are blatantly unlawful under the Geneva Conventions, which the United States itself signed. But the defiance has gone far beyond words. According to radio intercepts and eyewitness reports from the Strait of Hormuz, American generals on the ground have been deliberately ignoring orders to board and seize Iranian commercial vessels, particularly those bound for China. They've quietly allowed Iranian ships to pass through the very blockade they were ordered to enforce with an iron fist. And the most stunning act of refusal? Pentagon commanders have reportedly rejected direct commands to strike Iranian speedboat positions and missile batteries along the Hormuz coastline, a strike that would have triggered an all-out regional war. Meanwhile, the entire foundation of the American war machine has crumbled as Arab nations, one after another, have slammed their airspace and bases shut to the United States, effectively telling Washington that their reckless adventure in Iran will no longer be facilitated from Muslim soil. The architecture of Project Freedom is collapsing, and what we are seeing is nothing short of a mutiny of rationality within the American military structure. But the unraveling runs even deeper. This mutiny has left the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, looking like a man holding a map, while the ground beneath him shifts and breaks apart. Hegseth has publicly insisted that the ceasefire holds, that Project Freedom is locked and loaded, even as the very generals under his command are reportedly ignoring key operational directives. The disconnect between the civilian leadership in Washington and the uniformed commanders in the Gulf has become an unbridgeable chasm. Reports from regional intelligence sources, including Iranian state-linked outlets, reveal that there have been heated arguments, actual shouting matches, between field commanders in Washington over the lunacy of escalating the conflict. These commanders are seeing with their own eyes that Iranian military resolve is unshaken, that the Lebanese resistance remains potent, and that the entire region is a powder keg. They are choosing rationality, realizing that the Iranian question can only be resolved through diplomacy, not through a catastrophic military confrontation that would set the entire Middle East ablaze. This is a story of a superpower humiliated not by a foreign army, but by the conscience of its own military leaders. And if you're watching this and you find this reporting valuable, real journalism...
So here you go, though. It's collapsing from within, right? The system is collapsing.
Refuses to be a mouthpiece for empire. Now, let's talk about the specifics of this military insubordination, because the details are absolutely damning. The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has been an unmitigated disaster for the American Navy. The operation, which began after the failed peace talks in April, was supposed to strangle Iran's economy by preventing any commercial shipping from reaching its ports. But from the very first hours, the implementation has been chaotic and half-hearted, precisely because the commanders executing it know it's a fool's errand. According to multiple reports, including those citing conversations among American naval officers, there is a deliberate, systematic allowance of Iranian ships to transit the strait, particularly those heading toward Chinese ports. And think about that for a moment. The United States imposed a blockade, and its own navy is letting ships through. Radio intercepts, some of which have been analyzed by regional intelligence, expose conversations between American ship captains and their superiors in which they practically agree to look the other way. They are refusing to fire on Iranian vessels, refusing to board them, and refusing to escalate unless their own lives are directly threatened. This is an outright rebellion against the political leadership that started this war on February 28th, with the joint American-Israeli strikes that killed civilians, and Iran's then leader,
which they said was fun.
The generals now know that war was a monstrous mistake, and they are quietly ensuring it does not spiral into a global conflagration over a narrow waterway. This brings us to the even more explosive aspect of this story: the refusal of Arab nations to be complicit in Washington's bloodshed. For weeks, these same nations allowed their skies and runways to be used for the relentless bombing of a Muslim neighbor. Iranian missiles then started raining down on their American-guested bases, and suddenly, the calculus changed overnight. The most dramatic rupture has been with Saudi Arabia. While NBC breathlessly reported that the kingdom denied the U.S. access to its airspace for Project Freedom, the reality is a tangled web of hypocrisy, as you astutely pointed out. Prince Sultan Air Base, that massive installation south of Riyadh, is still bustling with American activity. We can see the footage, satellite imagery, and on-the-ground observations confirm that E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft, the eyes in the sky that coordinate entire battlefields, are still sitting on that runway. More than 15 massive KC-135 refueling tankers are still stationed there, essential for keeping American and Israeli fighter jets in the air for their illegal missions. So, despite the public posturing, the Saudi leadership is still, in practice, facilitating the infrastructure of war. Yet, the initial Saudi threat to cut off access completely was enough to make Trump blink and pause his entire Hormuz operation. That threat came because the base itself has been hit repeatedly. On March 27th, a devastating Iranian strike destroyed an American E-3 Sentry right on the ground at Prince Sultan, injuring numerous personnel. The Saudis realized that they were not a safe back office for the Pentagon. They were on the front line, and their cities were next. And it's not just Saudi Arabia that recoiled after feeling the heat of Iranian retaliation. The United Arab Emirates, whose airspace and even Emirati aircraft were directly implicated in operations against Iranian territory, closed its airspace entirely for a period earlier in the conflict. The UAE has long engaged in the fantasy of normalization with the occupation, but when Iranian missiles and drones began targeting their soil, the illusion shattered. Qatar, which hosts the massive Al Udeid airbase, a central forward headquarters for American Central Command, publicly declared it would not allow its airspace to be used for any aggression against Iran. Kuwait likewise suspended American access to its bases and airspace.
Iran knows how to hit.
Telling Washington that its territory would no longer be a launch pad for death. Then there is the formal, furious complaint lodged at the United Nations by Iran itself. Tehran explicitly named 4 nations: Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Kuwait, and presented detailed evidence of how American planes, drones, and surveillance aircraft operated from or through their territories to carry out strikes and intelligence operations against Iranian land. Under international law, a nation whose territory is used for an act of aggression against a third country is itself legally complicit. The Iranian letter to the Security Council was a warning shot, legally and militarily, that these nations' moment of reckoning is being meticulously documented. To truly grasp the geography of this betrayal and the subsequent cowardice, you have to visualize how the American and Israeli warplanes travel. When they take off from bases in the region or from carriers in the Persian Gulf, they fly north, often over the northern reaches of Saudi Arabia, crossing Jordanian airspace, or slicing through the skies of Iraq. They pass directly over or near major air defense deployment points that should, in any normal world, shut them down. Systems like the American-made Patriot batteries and terminal high-altitude area defense, which are scattered across the Gulf kingdoms, do not engage. These sophisticated radars can track a golf ball in orbit Yet we are supposed to believe they can't see squadrons of F-35s and F-15s racing eastward toward the Iranian border? The truth is obscene. Their complicity is written in their silence. The radar data is likely shared, the corridors are pre-cleared, and the air defense operators are given stand-down orders by their political masters. This is the dirty, unspoken reality of how the war on Iran has been physically carried out. A network of technological and territorial facilitation that makes every Gulf monarchy a silent partner in the destruction of a Muslim nation. But that silence ended the moment Iran's missiles demonstrated that it can and will strike anyone hosting the instruments of its destruction. The attacks on the Mubarak al-Kabir port in Kuwait and the drone strikes that sent American soldiers fleeing from their bases to civilian hotels across the Gulf forced a bitter, fearful pragmatism upon these governments. They learned that they cannot be a little bit at war with Iran while hoping to remain at peace. Yet as we connect all these threads, a single dominant theme emerges, a profound structural breakdown in the American command. Pete Hegseth, a man with no business leading the world's most powerful military machine, has visibly lost control
because he's
over his
nothing
own
but a
generals.
fucking
The situation
douche.
is so far gone that the generals
Just
are
a Fox
effectively mirroring
News
the historical
reporter.
precedent of officers who refuse to execute illegal orders, a principle deeply embedded in the United States' own military law. When the commander-in-chief rants on his social media platform telling Iran to open the fucking strait or face being bombed back to the Stone Age, he's not just being crude. He's issuing orders to destroy civilian power grids, bridges, and dams, which are textbook war crimes. The senior command staff, men and women who have actually studied the laws of armed conflict, are now asserting their loyalty to the Constitution over their loyalty to a deranged man in the Oval Office. This has created a schizophrenic war effort where the political leadership is threatening annihilation, while the
schizophrenia.
military leadership is quietly facilitating the survival of Iranian shipping. The occupation forces are now left holding the bag, with the Israeli Air Force chief making empty threats about deploying the entire Air Force eastward, while Mossad and the occupation's military leadership reportedly bicker furiously over the fact that the war has completely failed to achieve
pay
its
attention to
objectives.
those lyrics,
Iran is
you
not
know what it's
destroyed,
about.
Its nuclear program is not dismantled.
These lunars on
In
the
fact,
path.
The occupation's own internal security assessments, according to leaks, are screaming that a direct war
No wonder
with
why
Iran
it was
is
the
a strategic
longest selling
nightmare
album.
that only strengthens the Lebanese resistance and the entire axis of anti-imperialist forces. Looking ahead, the future of this disastrous war is being written not in the war rooms of the Pentagon or occupied Jerusalem, but in the diplomatic back channels of Beijing and Islamabad. The fact that Trump had to pause his vaunted Project Freedom after just 36 hours, caving to Saudi pressure and the quiet refusal of his own navy, shows the trajectory is pointing toward a humiliating climb down. The newly floated one-page memorandum of understanding being whispered about in Washington is essentially a document of surrender, dressed up as a peace deal.
Yep. They shall not regard their kings or princes. They're not even following orders of the liar and thief in power, right? Because Esau's nothing but a liar and thief, and his own people are turning against him. One big low. Did Trump just threaten to hit Iran with nukes? Here we go again. Threatening the country with nukes. President is clearly frustrated as the fighting is ramping back up. No deal in sight, which that's all fake anyways. Meanwhile, comments did not think to ease oil fears. Clearly frustrated, Donald Trump appears to threaten to use nuclear weapons against Iran, is ironically considering he made such a big deal about the fear of nuclear holocaust in the Ukraine war conflict when he was a 2024 candidate. You remember that. But the tables are turned. U.S. has failed to force Iran's capitulation and is locked in a game of competing blockades in the Hormuz. Trump's comments yesterday came after U.S. bombed targets on 2 Iranian islands following attacking Iranian launchers launched against 2 American warships. So, you know, tit for tat, going back and forth. So, here we go. But here we go. He's talking about one big glow, right? This is the highlight right here, right?
Good evening. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for being here. We begin this half hour with new details regarding U.S. strikes in the Strait of Hormuz, where military officials said 3 Navy ships came under attack. Let's go to Ryan Smith at the Live Desk to break down what we know so far. Ryan?
Yeah, here's a breakdown right here of what we know tonight. U.S. CENTCOM now says no U.S. ships were hit, confirming that U.S. forces eliminated those inbound threats today and targeted Iranian military facilities, including missile
shitload of lies
there. Now, late tonight, President Trump describing the scene, saying 3 American destroyers escaped the Strait of Hormuz with no damage suffered, all while under fire. Here he is.
They trifled with us today. We blew them away. They trifled. They call that a trifle.
They blew you away.
You won't have to know. If there's no ceasefire, you're not going to have to know. You just have to look at one big glow coming out of Iran. And they better sign their agreement fast.
Earlier today, Iran's UN ambassador vowing that they are ready, in fact, to allow freedom of navigation right there.
Peace is
through
war.
that critical Strait of Hormuz. If the war permanently ends, a deal is made, and the U.S. lifts its blockade.
So you see how much bullshit it is, right? No, wait, it's Trump shit. Right. Takes bullshit to a whole other level. It's trumped. U.S. official says Iran has 70% of pre-war missile stockpile and is assembling new ones. So they only use 30%. Okay? 30%. Well, guess what? It's bringing it, they're coming up again with this fake ceasefire. U.S. officials told Washington Post that the U.S. believes Iran maintains about 70% of its pre-war stockpile missiles and 75% of its pre-war inventory of missile launchers, painting a starkly different picture of Iran's military capabilities. Officials said that there was no evidence that Iran has been able to recover, just pretty much. Trump is saying that they wiped out their Navy, they wiped out their missile capabilities, they're reduced to this and that. You can see that it's all Trump shit. Israeli terrorists burn homes and cars in brutal West Bank raids. So that's another thing that's going on in the midst of everything. While there's a little pause in this war against Iran, they're still fighting people that they can't fight, right? That can't really fight against them, right? Because, they've cut off the so-called axis of resistance. So these Israeli terrorists are, of course, brutally raping and pillaging people in the West Bank, which was supposed to be part of that was a fucked up deal, but nonetheless, though, the remains of Palestine. Israeli terrorists launched another wave of raids in the occupied West Bank, with houses and cars set on fire and a Palestinian child attacked. Israeli terrorists torched a home in the village of Al-Luban, south of Nablus, after which members of the Palestinian Civil Defense arrived to extinguish the blaze. In Abu Falah, northeast of Ramallah, terrorists stormed the outskirts of the village, burned a citizen's vehicle, and wrote racist slogans on the walls of houses. Oh man, don't you ever fucking call these Israelis fucking racist. Oh no, you're anti... Oh wait, this shit doesn't work on press TV now, does it? Israeli terrorists also attacked a Palestinian man in the town of Beit Fishah, south of Bethlehem, and stole his mobile phone. It just goes on and on who the real terrorists are. And it's, you guessed it, Israeli state. The Israeli state and Levant, ISIL. So now you know that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the so-called Michael Jackson death, Prince's death, and all that really was because they were actually speaking against the atrocities that these, terrorists really were doing. Israeli strikes against southern Lebanon kill 20 more civilians, because it's fun. The King of Babylon says it's fun. At least 20 people, including civil defense rescuer, have been martyred after Israeli air raids target a number of areas in southern Lebanon, despite the ceasefire between Beirut and Tel Aviv. Right? Lebanese news. Lebanon's army is really an Israeli army. The only government that really is a formidable government is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the only one that comes to the defense when that's many times, but nonetheless, though, they're doing everything they can to make it another Israeli state. They already control what you would say the House and Senate of Lebanon, but they haven't gotten rid of the axis of resistance. They haven't gotten rid of Hezbollah, which is the only opposing force that's still there. So they're doing what they can to try to get there. And of course, after taking Syria, they're still wiping it out, because that was also a part of the big resistance against them taking Syria to begin with. So Hezbollah, being attacked by both sides, which Israeli state controls Syria as well. You can say Israeli occupied Syria, because Hayat al-Sham is nothing more than Israeli influence over there. But you also got Turkey's involvement too. You know, Turkey is not innocent at all in this. You got these terrorist groups, which is all led by Mossad, because guess what? Turkey has Mossad too. Remember, they're the other flip side of Amalek. Yeah, these are the ones that claim Islam. You know, they claim to be Muslim. You know, and they were part of the Ottoman Empire, so, you know, you can go into the history of that. But nonetheless, though, Amalek, the least of the flock, shall draw them out, shall make their habitations desolate because of them, right? So, you know, we're going to get into one more scripture here. So, getting into Ezekiel's prophecy, which is talking about Saudi Arabia when you get to the Libya part, because, you know, when you look at how long the structure is, which includes Ethiopia, parts of that too. You know, when you look at how long the structure is in all the oil countries, well, it makes a lot of sense. And eventually, well, Magog, which is Russia, is going to play a much more role. Now, you see some of them in the war against Bashar al-Assad, that they came to his defense a little bit, but Bashar al-Assad rested, you know, didn't really use their services. So now, you know, getting into this future war here, Turkey, which was another one that Russia was working with, well, they're eventually going to call upon Russia to defend them, especially when the Israeli state attacks them, which this Bennett guy is talking about Turkey being the next Iran. So you got to be looking for that. You know, you got to be watching. You know, have an eye on everything, right? Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 4: I will turn you around and put hooks into your jaws, to lead you out with your whole army, your horses, charioteers, in full armor, a great horde armed with shields and swords, meaning all your modern day weaponry, which include hypersonic missiles, hypersonic ballistic missiles. Persia, Ethiopia, Libya will join you with all their weapons. So they're going to be safeguarding all these places, and really about the oil countries in that area. Gomer and all its armies will also join you. So basically they're all going to join Russia. All of them. So that includes Saudi Arabia. Oh wait, if you look at it this way, Saudi Arabia did join them. And you've heard of the BRICS members. Think about that. The BRICS states, which, yeah, you could add United Arab Emirates. Eventually all of them are going to join Russia. Turkey became a BRICS member too. So think about that. You know, this is really breaking that down. So that's not a surprise when you see that on the world scene, yet it's matching what this says. Gomer and all its armies will join you, with the armies of Bet Togarmah from the distant north and many others. Get ready, be prepared, keep all your armies around you mobilized, and take command of them. There it is. So Russia's going to be leading this fight, you know, to protect all these areas, but also to destroy the Israeli state, to come against Amalek itself in the region. Long time from now, you will be called into action, which, that long time from now, we're already in that action. In the distant future, you will swoop down on the land of Israel, which will be enjoying peace after recovering from war. Oh, isn't that interesting? So, when they think that they've had their way and recovered from the war, this is when Russia gets involved. So, they have to achieve some sort of victory here. The Israeli state has to achieve some sort of victory here before Russia comes after them. So keep that in mind. And not to mention, there has to be some sort of peace and all that, and they get in their way. You know, a lot of people thought that was, you know, when they took Syria, but there's more to it than just Syria. After its people have returned from many lands to the mountains of Israel, you and all your allies, a vast and awesome army, will roll down on them like a storm and cover the land like a cloud. So, basically, you know, just as they're celebrating victory after a long war, this is when Russia gets involved. This part hasn't happened yet. but it's not too distant from now. So we're just watching, measuring the times diligently. They got a fake virus out there, and, well, in the midst of a fake virus, they can lock everything down, and a famine of the word can happen, because they did silence a lot of people speaking out against the corona hoax, the coronavirus hoax, you know, which Hanta means fake. This fake virus literally is what hantavirus means. So pretty much so, and the guise of all that, they get a famine of the word will come. Then you got the ushering in of the MOTB, the implantable micro C-head, will come in the midst of all this, and then this war, as you're reading here, will break out, and then the missiles will be launched from the four corners of the earth. And as a result of receiving the MOTB, you'll be caught in judgment or in contempt. You know, pretty much so, being predetermined to be destroyed. Because that's what it means, is your predetermination of being destroyed by Yahweh Shai for taking the MOTB. So hopefully this has all been edifying. For I don't say Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem Rekakadash, Wa Abba Babal. Brakatham, Jehovah elect, Shalom.